Okay. We have finished the study of the healing of the boy with the evil spirit. And I don't think, in fact, I know that I have never been able to share all the richness of that passage with a class before. And I went out hardly touching the floor. And when you got weak legs like mine, that's a blessing. If I could do it without touching the floor. But I'm afraid that the class wouldn't be assembled where I would be able to do that. But I just want you to know that it was an outstanding class. And from a few things that I got feedback, and from the look on your faces, I feel sure that you sensed it too. So thank you for that experience. While everyone was expressing astonishment at what he was saying, this is one of those kind of literary marks, trademarks of Luke's gospel.
Charles, what page are we on and what verse?
20?
Page 20?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
44.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Jesus again foretells his death, the pericope title. This is, see, in Mark's literary, I don't know what you'd call it, quirk, whatever.
Signature.
I like that, your signature. You do come up with some stuff once in a while. Yeah. Signature, yeah, that's the technical term for it. So Mark's was immediately. So much so that if you take a translation of the Gospel of Mark and highlight immediately, it'll look like it's got smallpox. It has so many times. About 92% of all the uses of ekthos, which is the Greek word for immediately, in the New Testament, Mark uses. Luke's is, while he was yet speaking. And do you see that those are equivalent ideas? That both of them want you to realize how busy Jesus was.
Like pace setters.
What?
Like pace setters.
Pig's feathers?
Pace setters. They set the pace.
Oh, pace setters.
Sorry.
Jesse, my ears are
And my voice is too.
is going the way of everything else in my body. So yes, they set the pace, and a fast pace. There's nothing slow-paced about the life of Jesus. He had a sense of urgency, not anxiety, but urgency, because he knew how much he wanted to do and how little time God's plan allowed for him to do that. And so he would go to the very edge of exhaustion before he withdrew into a quiet time with his Father. Because while he had unbelievable stamina and was physically in top-notch shape, he still was human, and he wore out. Everyone was still expressing astonishment. Now, This is not astonishment at healing the boy, because many people there, including the apostles, had come to expect that. Remember? They went out to heal. But astonishment at his explanation. That's what we enjoyed and were excited about in the class. How this event, which seems to be rather minor to us, has all of the elements of God's working in the life of believers, and including the key element of prayer, that you have to depend on God to get the work done. See, that's the point there. It's not that just a prayer will get out, old demon, but a prayer that says, I am totally depending on God. And God is rubbing my nose in that. Every once in a while I'll say, if that's what all this is about, you've got my attention. I am dependent. I'm getting to where I am dependent on God for the next breath of air I draw. And
You always have been.
what?
You always
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, Steve. All it is reminding me of something that I ought to have learned a long time ago. From the time that a newborn baby does that first draws in the first breath of air. Well, even before then, when God breathed into Adam and he became a living being, He's done that for every one of us. And from moment to moment, from one breath to another, the intervals between them are as short as they are, only because God authorizes the next one. Now, I don't mean to make you live anxiously, because it is God's purpose for you to finish what He has assigned you to do. And until that work is finished, nobody can shut that breath off.
That's right.
So, you see?
Even yourself, I mean, like, you know, sometimes it's a drag to, like,
Yes.
you want to be with the Lord, and it's like, but there must be some work that has to be done.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I learned that when God wanted me to write my book. I was in terrible pain. And I mean, the kind of pain that comes when a nerve is really being pinched. And I cried out, please take this from me. And it turned off, like turning off a light switch. And you know my first thought? God, what do you want from me? That is,
Thou this.
what?
What meanest thou this?
Yeah. Okay, let's get back here. He said to his disciples, store up what I'm about to say in your memory. Do you realize that that's one of the techniques that this Believe series is all about? Store it up in your memory. Because, now, I want to be clear here. Maybe it's in defense of myself. I have a terrible time memorizing the exact words of anything. I think of things in terms of concepts or ideas involved. And that is relatively easy for me. But memorization is not. And so, of the two, I'm going to think that the idea, the concept is more important. Now, I hope that's not just self-justification. I don't think it is, because if it were so, then there could only be one translation of the text of the Bible. And one of my problems in remembering biblical texts is there's too many texts, too many versions of it. And I will start out with one and go to 3 or 4 before I'm through. So this is what it means, store it up. This means the psalmist says, I have hidden your word in my heart that I may not sin against you. Now, why did he want his apostles, his disciples, to know about the thing he's going to tell them about? First of all, what is he going to tell them about?
His death.
He's going to tell them about his death. Now, why was that important? Don't you talk, don't you talk. Come on.
I have an idea. I mean, his statement comes while the people around are expressing astonishment and being all excited about what he did. It's almost like he wants them to remember, don't expect this to keep happening. Because what he says is, the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men.
Okay.
Like, they're going to turn on you, so
Okay.
don't get too excited here.
That is one of the basic reasons. There's maybe some more, but you're following the text. Notice, I want to emphasize this, not just to make you feel good, Pam.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Feel bad.
No, but the way to follow the story, the plot line in the text of the Bible, is just follow the text. It's so simple that we most often overlook it, but it's true. Okay, what other thing do you think?
Could it be almost like prophecy, so that when it does happen, they'll say, he said it would happen?
Yes. Now, did it completely assuage their problem? No way. Well, the next pericope deals with that idea.
Wasn't part of the issue too in that the Jews were looking for the Messiah in the form of a king, a ruling king, and they missed the suffering servant part of it, and so this was just trying to remind them that there's two parts to who the Messiah was.
Thank you, Lord, because that's one of the key teachings in the New Testament, is that difficulty with two kinds of messiahs. The triumphant king in the lineage of David who would rule the earth until the new heaven and the new earth came in, and then return the kingdom to the Father. The other one is the suffering servant by whose stripes we are healed, who gives life to our mortal bodies and that. And the Jews, along with believers today, really find it difficult to merge those two ideas into the single person of Jesus. You find the triumphal ones who emphasize, well, God wants us healed. See how they take healing from the suffering and put it in. Now, that's biblical as far as that goes. Remember, when the blind people wanted to see, they addressed Jesus as son of David. Because one of the tasks of an ancient king was to heal. You know that until well into the last part of the 18th century, the kings and queens of England set aside a day in which people could come and they would heal them. The dermatologic manifestation of tuberculosis, what is scrofula, I believe is the way to pronounce it. That was called the king's evil because they thought he could heal them. So you have that idea of healing. But on the other hand, it's hard for us to be humble enough to see, and humble is the correct term, to see that it is only by surrender. Boy, that's hard. Almost every cell of our body wants to win. But how did Christ redeem us? By consciously saying, "It is finished." He told Pilate, "You can't take my life from me." Imagine that. His executioner. You talk about brassiness. Here was this man that had a whole legion of soldiers within 4 or 5 miles of where they were standing. And Jesus says, "You can't take my life from me. The only way I will die is if I surrender." And I hope you really realize that, because there are times when it's time to fight. Time to fight against that old final enemy, death. But there are times when you can get what you really desire only by surrendering. You can't force anybody to love you. That's what makes love so difficult. There is that person that we want more than anything else in the world to love us. And so we want to take them by the throat and say, "Love me." The only thing you can do is surrender. Now, it's easier for us human beings to see that from a female perspective. But men, it's just as true of you. Anything you get by force or intimidation or just by being who you are, that ain't love. So that's how much is involved here. He wanted them to know all of these aspects of it. The Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of men. Now, the key word here is betrayed. He allowed the decision of a single, troubled, perverse human being to be the instrument by which he was placed on the cross.
Isn't this a picture of what happened with Satan too? Satan betrayed God. So in a certain sense, this betrayal replicates that?
Yes. Yes. It was. And notice an aspect that I've been emphasizing the last 2 or 3 years in my teaching is that wickedness never thinks in terms of losing. Carol, every time I say that, you have an aha experience.
It's just an angle that I had not even considered.
Yes. See, that explains why criminals, deterrence doesn't do any good, because they're going to be the exception. They're so concentrated on what they want that they cannot literally conceive of not getting it. Now, you say, well, I'm a lot of that way too. I won't go there, I just let you go there. That's wickedness. Jesse?
What may have kept them from even accepting these words at first is that they didn't want to hear it?
Yes,
Didn't want to?
that's right. Because they thought that all their hopes was in the triumphal Messiah. And they just, well, you cannot, let me put it, you cannot think about your own death, because you're always there in the wings of the theater watching what's going on.
So when they talked about sitting on his right and left hand, they didn't understand. He says, you don't know what you're asking for.
Yes, they will do that, but the price they're going to pay is not what they want to. Okay, all of that. But they did not understand his statement. It was concealed from them so that they could not grasp its meaning. Furthermore, they were afraid to ask him about it. Have you ever wanted to ask somebody you loved or respected about something and were afraid to ask? Had you ever really thought through that aspect of it? Because your asking is not going to change what that other person thinks or has decided. But here is that not what?
Rub.
Yeah, the rub. And that is, if they ever say it, then you can't dream that it might be otherwise. So you just keep your mouth shut.
Charles,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the text here. Kidding. But the last thing he had said to them up in the other pericope is, "Oh, you unbelieving, perverse generation, how long must I remain with you and put up with you?" No wonder they were scared to ask him. Well, what do you mean by that? I mean, they'd kind of just been called down for their...
Yes. And here is the thing. But notice, on the other hand, they are demonstrating the truth of his statement about perverse and unbelieving.
Yeah,
See?
because they didn't understand, they didn't believe.
Okay. Now, at that time, see, this is another one of those signature ideas. It is, notice, coincidentally, I was tempted to translate this coincidentally, except I don't believe with God anything is a coincidence.
It may happen together, but it isn't.
Yeah. So what it follows a kind of spiritual plot or script, because they were thinking in terms of who was going to be again at the right hand and the left hand, who was going to be the triumphal Davidic kings right and left-hand man. About which one of them would be greatest. Now, I put this in the future idea. It is not in the future tense in Greek, but it is in the tense of not yet being complete. It's the idea of the imperfect idea, not completed. So that the idea, I think, is best conveyed with the word would, because they confidently expected him to be the king. And guess what? He would be the king. But he just wouldn't be the king they were thinking about and wanting. Jesus, knowing the argument they harbored in their hearts. Now, sometimes it says Jesus knowing what they were arguing about. Here, their argument was not in his hearing. See? He knew what it was in their heart, though. Now, how far away, how much time we're talking about, that's not important. Or Luke would have put it down. Not important for Luke's purposes. He, knowing what they harbored in their heart, he took a little child and had the child stand beside him. Now, I'm going to keep saying this because every time we think about a child, and Jesus saying you have to be like a little child and all, we think of innocence. No first century Jew would even think for a split second in terms of innocence. They did not believe children were innocent. Now, that doesn't mean that they were either right or wrong. They just didn't believe it. That was just the way the custom and the thinking was. So it is not innocence that Jesus is talking about, because none of us are ever innocent. Pardon me raising my voice, but I'm going to cut through the smoke screens that has concealed in all these texts since I can remember, and probably since they were written down when it got outside the Jewish milieu. What he is talking about is dependence. Some cultures today believe that children are innocent. Some cultures don't believe they're innocent. But there is one thing that's true in every human culture, and that is children are dependent. They will not survive on their own. It doesn't take too long. Once in a while you find where a 3 or 4 year old wanders off, and they, not too long ago, one, I think he was 4 years old, survived a week in a climate that got below freezing every night. And they found him, and he was in relatively good shape. But why is that headline news across the country? Because it happens so very seldom. Most 4-year-olds cannot survive more than 2 or 3 days separated from people that will take care of it. So that's what he said. He's told them, whoever welcomes this child in my name also welcomes me. Now, that means whoever accepts the responsibility for this child, whoever furnishes the thing that the child needs. Now, to do that, you've got to put the child's welfare, what? Above your own. If you don't believe that, you haven't had any children. When a child is hungry, everybody within earshot knows. When a child is not getting what they want, everybody within earshot. There was a little boy about 15, 16 months old, just across the aisle to my left. Cute little red-headed boy. And his father was infinitely patient with him. And he pointed out things for him to see, and the kid did this. But just about 2/3 of the way through the sermon, the boy decided, this is not what I want, and I don't want to be here. And he started tentatively. Father, he got a little louder. And then, Ma! So the father got up and took him out. See, that's what's going on here. Jesus said, if you are going to be the greatest in the kingdom, you have to be willing to surrender what you want in order to take care of people who are dependent. That's a hard lesson. It's one of the lessons that I wish we could get into our political discussion today. Now, I'm not telling you who to vote for. I've got some opinions about who I ought to vote for, but none for who you ought to vote. But you don't hear that at all. What's in it for me? What do I want? Guess what that sounds like from this pericope. What?
A little child.
The little child. Exactly. Instead of being the one who takes care of the little child, we are the child, right? Hollering out, take care of me. And that is as unbiblical as you can get. I don't care what moral standards you have that are in line with the text of the Bible. And I know that in this country, there's immorality goes cloaked in the sense of morality. Only a fool would deny that. But you know, there's something more important than that. And that is, who is going to take care of the dependents among us? Now, I'm not saying that we ought to have a total welfare state. What I'm saying is the church ought to be a total welfare institution. There oughtn't to be any needy people in the church, in the kingdom. That's what the kingdom is all about. where every dependent person gets what they need. Not what they want necessarily, but what they need. And guess who that includes? You and me. Sometimes we're taking care of other dependents. I must confess that the hardest thing I'm dealing with right now is that I have to ask Mina or Terry, had to, as I walked from the worship center down the hallway, the whatever it's called, I had to ask a man in his 40s, would you mind giving me your seat? That comes very hard. I have to ask Mina, would you fill my water glass with ice and water? Would you bring me a cup of coffee? That's unbelievably hard. But it is only a concrete symbol of the dependencies I've always had. Do you know that since 1949, when I started preaching, I've never been not dependent on the generosity of a local congregation for the bread I eat, the clothes I wear. And I have never really liked that. But it's true. If reality doesn't satisfy me, guess what? Who needs to change? You know, we hate to admit that. We talk about it being demeaning, but it's only demeaning to that old arrogant, sinful self. It's just the way God organized His world. So we better get with it. And all of that's included in here. That's not chasing rabbits. That is where this is all about. And see, Jesus is saying, look, you, my apostles, are dependent on me. And that's what my death is all about. Could Randy have made it much clearer today that we cannot save ourselves? See, notice how all of these things, in fact, as you go through the Gospels, you will find the principles of salvation by grace in the most unexpected places. Because that's the way, that's who God is. He didn't just make a plan on the side. This isn't a side dish. This is the main course. Okay. Let's see if we can find out. Oh, for whoever is least among you is the one who is really great. You know, I've done this several times, but I won't do it again. if we're drawing a kind of a diagram of importance, this person up there is important because of the number of people under him. Jesus is important because every human being is dependent on his work on the cross. I'm not going to get into the theological speculations and argumentations about it. The passage that Randy quoted from Acts 4, just people read that, hear it quoted, and automatically it's assumed that it says everybody has to have personal faith in Christ. It does not say that. It says there is no other person in whose name people can be saved. Let me paraphrase it a little differently. If anyone is saved, they're saved because of what Christ did.
Whether they know it or not.
Whether they know it or not, that's right. Whether they know it or not, whether they've even heard about him or not. Now, who can sort that out?
God.
Thank you, Pastor. You just took literally the word right out of my mouth. But that's good. I'm glad the class does that. Yes, God is the only one. That means I can't get up in the pulpit and preach it because God hasn't revealed how he's going to do that. I know you'd like to know, but I can tell you a sure way to know. Wait till you get in the new heaven and the new earth, and you will know. But nobody that isn't there yet, and nobody is there yet because it hadn't been done. Nobody outside of those will ever know how God does all of that. But one thing we do know, that is, the work of Christ is cosmic in nature. Every person who will ever be saved, and that includes before the cross, after the cross, will be saved because of the cross. And that's the idea here. So that if you are in the kingdom, if you're just barely in, maybe your coattail got caught in the door behind you. But you can lose that coattail and you're still in. See, that's what he means. He doesn't mean that the last is better or bigger or more important than other people, but that they are in. They are just as important. If you go back and say, well, that means that I'm the most humble person around, so I'm the greatest. You see the paradox that will involve that? No, they'd be right back where the apostles were arguing. It is our dependence that makes us in the kingdom, and therefore the greatest. Now, John responded, and we got about 5 minutes. I'm going to go into this pericope. Probably won't finish it, but go into it. John responded. Now, what does Luke intend for us to know about teach us in these words. John responding. Now let's just look at the text. What has he said?
Well, they want you to look at the previous text. And then,
What? I
if
didn't.
we read John responded, we have to go to the previous text to see what he's responding to.
Okay, yes. And what is he responding to? That's the question I'm asking.
So the statement that whoever is least among you is among really great?
Yes. See? What this does, it says, if you're in the kingdom, it's one thing, and if you're out, in other words, it's a vital difference between. So John said, okay, Lord, yeah, I know what you mean. It's always dangerous to tell Jesus what he means. And yet we still do that. Preachers do that. John says, I know what you mean because I saw somebody that wasn't in the kingdom, see? You see, that's the connection. I want you to get the plot, the
It's
story.
interesting that all three Gospels mention this thing.
Yes.
John.
Yes. We saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because they are not of our group. Now, I know that it says they're not of us. Now, but that doesn't give the full flavor.
Does this have any connection when you go back a little bit further when Jesus sent them out and said, go, and I'm giving you authority to do this, 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 and this?
Right on, JT.
So they felt like they had the authority, but someone who wasn't there didn't have it.
That's exactly right. But notice what John saw. You see, that's what we don't usually think about. What did John see happening? Come on.
Powerful miracle, casting out demons.
In other words, what's important? Which group you belong to? I'm Apollos, I'm of Apollos, I'm of... So, see, no, it's not...
Church denomination to me.
What?
So that sounds like church denomination.
It sure does. It sure does.
Well, he saw somebody doing exactly what they couldn't do. They had
Yes, that's an irony. See, this is all happening in the same context of not being able.
squirming now.
In other words, John, you saw somebody doing what you ought to have done and couldn't, and you're going to say you are superior to him? I don't think so. See, that's what I say. It's always dangerous to tell Jesus what he means. Don't do it. You'll get your nose bloody. Not because he'll hit you, but because the truth will.
I'm having a hard time relating this to talking about the little children. Is John still trying to figure out who's in and out? Is that the...
Yes, that's the thing. See, Jesus said, whoever is least among you is the one who is really greatest. And John said, okay, I know what you mean, Lord. I'm going to go back and say it again. Because I saw somebody who was out. And I couldn't wait to tell him how out he was. But, okay.
I've been soaking all this up, and you didn't wind up where I thought you were going to wind up.
Good.
If you go back up to, where this all started, he calls them a faithless and perverse generation. And then he says, let these words sink down into your ears. The Son of Man is going to be delivered, or I'm going to be, Son of Man is going to be delivered in the hands of men. I was just imagining them off on the side talking about that, thinking, and you were talking about how children are dependent. These guys have been dependent on Jesus, and they're saying, off on the side saying, well, who's going to take care of us until he gets undelivered from the hands of men?
Yeah.
So they all start saying, well, I can take care of you guys.
Yeah, I get it.
Take care of you guys. And then he says, to counter that, you're going at it from the wrong direction. You need to be thinking about who's going to be taking care of you, or put yourself in an inferior position.
Yeah.
And then I get down to what John says, and I'm thinking, wondering if John's saying, well, if that's the way it is, how are we supposed to respond to these people who are not with us, but are casting demons out in your name, rather than, I don't know, I just see it coming from a different direction. I was just trying to piece all those things together.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, there's other threads of meaning in this, and that's as far as we're gonna go. I knew we wouldn't get through with it. We'll take up with your question next week, Steve.